In Vermont and most places in the United States, sex offenses are the offenses that are the most concern to most people in the public, legislators, victims. So we have given lots of attention to this group. Once someone has been charged and convicted, one of the things that we do with every single sex offender is to have a probation officer and sometimes a psychologist do reports that the judge can use to help decide what type of sentence would be most appropriate. And in terms of sentence, it would be how many years the person will receive for a sentence. And the second part is, if they're going to be placed in the community, what type of probation conditions the offender should receive so that his risk can be managed in an appropriate way. So our judges find that very helpful, to have as much information as possible about who this person is, the risk that they pose to reoffend, the types of victims that they've offended in the past, and the kinds of conditions that need to be set in place to keep the community safe. For offenders that go to prison, the living conditions within the prison are going to vary depending on the offender's cooperation with rules. If the offender is not being cooperative, if he's acting out, if he's being violent, then the prison environment where he lives will be very secure to protect staff and other inmates. As the offender is more cooperative, if they're interested in treatment, then the living conditions begin to improve. The goal really is to do everything that we can to provide a carrot and stick for motivation. That also starts with a sentence. So whereas some places might give a sentence of, say, 5 years for an offense, many times the offender will say to himself, I have 5 years, whether I do treatment or I don't, whether I behave or I don't behave, I'm going to be done, I'm going to be finished with my sentence in 5 years. So that often, at least in Vermont we find, is not very motivating to get the offender into treatment or to follow conditions. So a fairly common sentence type in Vermont and many other states is what's called a minimum and a maximum. So the offender might get a sentence of 2 years to 10 years or 5 years to 15 years. And the goal is to motivate them to get into treatment and to follow conditions once they go into the community. So for someone who gets a 5 to 10 year sentence, if they come into treatment in prison, if they successfully complete, then they can potentially get out at 5 years and then be supervised in the community for 10 years. If they don't go into treatment, if they misbehave, if they don't learn how to manage their risk, they can do the entire 10 years.